Thanks for being with us. On the panel today, we have Colette Smart, psychologist and teacher. We also have social researcher Mark McCrindle and the Coordinator of Sports Chaplaincy New South Wales, Raewyn Elsgood. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Mark, is there such a thing as Australian culture? What does that mean?
There is. We're a very diverse nation, but we know that there is a culture different to other countries we look at, because whenever people bring in Americanisations in words, we say, hang on, we don't want to call our footpaths sidewalks, or I know when I hear my kids talk about soft drinks as sodas, we say, no, we're Australian. And we look across to England and there's some commonalities, but we see their social classes, and we're a far more egalitarian culture here. We love to find our differences from New Zealand. We like to compete against them. So we know that we're different to even some comparable nations. Probably that culture has emerged over many years. We're a migrant majority nation, so that shaped a lot of our culture. More than half of our population now either themselves were born overseas or have at least one parent born overseas. And so we're a culture that's a mix of so many nations. Plus, of course, our First Nations people that shape so much of the modern Australian culture. So it's hard to define what the Australian culture is. We know what it's not. We know we don't want to be like the other nations. And we know that we do have a lot of warm things about our relaxed culture, that we're fairly easygoing, that we don't take ourselves too seriously, that we like to make a contribution and help others, and that we pretty much back ourselves as we give it a go on the global stage. So all of those characteristics come together to create a little bit of a unique culture in this part of the world down under.
Yep, that we have a whole lot of pride in. I think there's absolutely Aussie pride. But Colette, when you think about what our understanding of Australian identity might be, how does that impact the way we each live individually, day to day, that connection to this idea of Australianism?
Well, as I open my mouth, you can hear I'm just not the Australian in the room. I'm a citizen and we've lived here for almost 20 years. I'd lived in the UK for a while before I came here, and all three nations speak English, yet I couldn't find certain things on the shop shelves that I was used to finding before. I often say to parents, and I think I can because I wasn't born here, I often say to parents, it's so important for your children to have connection to their culture and their community. There's certain South Africanisms that are still very much part of our home, but there's other things that are so important for your child being Aussie, because they've grown up here and they are Aussie. So certain things in your culture are anchors, and it helps your child feel they belong to something greater than themselves. But we need to, as families who are migrants, be really open to how Australian culture is slightly different, and certain things like tall poppy syndrome and mateship stood out to me. So yeah, there's beautiful things in this country. We love it.
And sport is one of the massive things in this country. I don't even have a team, and I feel like that makes me un-Australian somehow. But how has sport become so synonymous with being Australian?
You just have to look outside our window and look at our geography and our climate. Yes. We have 24/7, 365 days a year, a climate that we can go outdoors and play sport. That is very different to many other cultures and countries. So we are blessed. We are surrounded by water. So we just automatically have water sports. And then the migrants, that Mark's alluded to, have all brought their own sports to Australia. Yep. And then Aussies are great with their mateship, like Colette has said, and all want to go, and we are a real give it a go type culture to bring all that together.
Yeah, and identity then is a sort of natural after effect of having some kind of sport group to be part of, a church group, a social group of some kind. Mark, how does that connection to some kind of group really influence what we believe about ourselves and understand about our identity?
Yeah, well, often our identity is not just an individual one, but it's a collective one. So we will identify ourselves based on, the company that we work for, or perhaps the group we're part of, where we live, which is not just an individual thing. There's thousands of other people that live in that same suburb or area, and of course our sporting team. And that collectivism, I think, is important. We've often thought of Australia perhaps as individualistic, because a lot of the Western world, it's about the individual. But actually, of recent times, I've seen more and more in our research how we are a collectivist nation, like you see a lot in Asia, for example. People people come together. They try to respond to what the authorities might be saying. We saw over the last few years with various health mandates and other things, Australians got together. They tended to do the sensible thing. They tended to respond to what was being told, and we showed ourselves to actually be collectivists rather than anti-authority and individualistic. And that collectivism is helped as we realise our connection with sports or groups or other identities.
Yeah, and for all the different people that live in Australia that make up these different identities, each of us do have an ability to shape what our cultural identity is. Colette, how would you say we do that? If we want to be positive contributors to our national identity, how can we be part of that?
I think the key word there is positive. I think it's looking for what is beautiful and wonderful in this country and celebrating some of that. Of course, there's, issues that happen and, certain decisions that get made that we might not agree with, but there's so many beautiful things that work here. Celebrating those things and then getting out and supporting your local teams and, doing sausage sizzles and fairy bread and, I'm just throwing out words that are things that for me were these beautiful lights that went on when I came into Australia. It's just discovering some of those things that are so Aussie that makes you feel as though you're part of the Australian community.
Yeah. Raewyn, would you add anything to that, how we can be positive contributors to our cultural identity?
Yeah, I think look at the foundation of what you love, where your heart is. I went to sport because of my children. Other people will go to other things because of their family. Be present, in that space and actually ask the receive and the give. When you talked about earlier about transactional, we will always benefit and receive from it regardless, and it will overwhelm us with just how much our community will love us when we need it.
Yeah, I feel like I just want to say Aussie, 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 You got it, there we go. Thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us as well.
If there's a topic that you'd like to see discussed on Helping Hands, visit our website and be in touch. We love talking about the things that make the world a better place.